Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is Corsair's AF120 Elite High Performance Fan. Now these are cooling fans that are designed to run with excellent cooling performance, delivering high static pressure and excellent airflow, while also keeping quiet and running at a reasonably quiet speed. They'll also run at 0 RPM mode, which I'll show you a bit later on, if necessary, which means that they are potentially very quiet and also very good at cooling. Now these are interesting because they are obviously not RGB, which means they're easier to install, but also they're designed to run quieter and more effectively than other fans. You can see it here alongside Corsair's QL120 fans, and what you'll notice is at the back there are a lot of fins, and the front fan fins are also angled, and there's just more going on in order to focus on the airflow. So basically the higher pressure airflow running through them. So if you're looking for the best cooling performance, but also don't necessarily want RGB, then this might be the way to go. Now, I've done a video recently using the Noctua fans in Corsair's 4000D airflow, because I was demonstrating something similar in how you can use non-RGB fans to simply install some really good quality fans and get good cooling. So in this video, I'm swapping out those Noctua fans and replacing them with Corsair's AF120 fans. As you'll see, they'll work both on case and radiator, so they work for both cooling your radiator and for running through the case in both intake and exhaust, pushing cold air in and through the case in a nice way. They're designed to deliver fantastic cooling performance, and one of the things that's interesting is the fact that they'll also run at 0 RPM mode. So if you have a Commander fan controller, which I'll show you in a minute, like the Commander Pro or the Commander Core, you can hook those up and then reduce the speed of the fans to keep things running quietly. A bit later on I'm going to show you a benchmark and also just a test of the loudness of these fans when they're ramped up and also in their quiet mode. Now Corsair claims that you can get the fans to spin at around 31 decibels, which is very quiet, and also obviously if you're running at 0 RPM mode, even quieter, but that will depend on the case and what you've set it up with. But in this case, obviously, I'm using the 4000D airflow and a number of these fans hooked up in a variety of ways, and I'll talk about why in a minute. I'm setting the front fans to intake and then the top and rear to exhaust. And I'll leave the specs of the build in the description, but it's the same one I used in the Noctua, and I'm also doing a separate video to compare the performance of these fans with the Corsair QL120s that I set up in the 4000D QL edition. Check out the links in the description if you've not seen that video already. Now, I mentioned already that you use the Commander Core, so here I have one from another cooler, but obviously you can purchase this separately, and basically you can plug all the fans into that. So I'm plugging all the case fans into that, the 3 front fans and the rear fan, in order to have control in Corsair's iCUE software over these fans. You can obviously connect them up to system fan headers. Instead, I've done a video previously on how to wire Corsair fans if you're curious and want to know more. But now I'm basically going about the process of installing the other 2 fans on the radiator. Obviously, I'm setting them face down into the case so that they'll pull the air up and through the rad and out the top. Now, these fans are connected up to the pump head, so I'm going to be connecting them up to the pump head on the cooler, which means that the pump will have control over the fans and the pump as well, and then have the best cooling performance in that way. I think it's best to keep the fans separate from the fans on the case, just to have control over them, and you'll see what difference that makes in a second, and the overall cooling performance of these. Now, as you've seen, the setup process is fairly straightforward. Yes, I've removed some of the steps, but if you're using a Commander Core, basically makes it a lot easier to plug all the fans in at the rear. For these 2 fans that are connected, they have a breakout cable on the pump head, so I can just plug the power in for those to that cable, and that's really easy as well. So then the pump will have control over those fans in a really straightforward way. So the setup is a lot easier than RGB fans for a start, so that makes life a lot easier. So if you're not bothered about RGB, these fans might be the way to go. And then turning it on and you can see them spinning up. Now, I was struck by how quiet these are, especially when you've got the panel on, but even when the side panel is open, you'll see just the sort of volume of these. I have a decibel meter to give you an idea of it, and obviously it's worth bearing in mind this is going to vary depending on your environment. If you're in a particularly hot room, for example, the fans will need to run a bit hotter, but what you will notice is the top fans on the radiator aren't spinning, and that's because they can work with 0 RPM mode, so when they're not required they simply won't spin up. We do have the front 3 fans and the rear fans spinning currently, and I'm getting about 40 decibels. Now it's worth bearing in mind I haven't changed any settings in iCUE at the moment, so these are just spinning at the default speed, probably in balanced mode, and that's what you'd get. And obviously also the doors open and the decibel meter is jammed inside the case, so you're not likely to put your ear inside the case without the door on. So for a more realistic test, I've now shut the door. You can see the top fans are now spinning, and just give you an idea of the sound. So as I said already, Corsair claims around 30 decibels minimum. I'm getting about 45, which actually is quite reasonable, and you'll see in a later video when I compare them with the QL120s that at maximum speed those things are considerably louder. Obviously, once again, this is still at the standard settings though, and we're not really doing anything terribly intense at the moment, so it's worth bearing that in mind. But in a second I'll show you how things change when you start ramping up what's going on inside the PC. But here you can see a look at the fans themselves and what they look like. Quite understated. I actually think they go quite nicely with this case. Obviously quite stealthy in terms of being white. No RGB lighting here. And obviously I have the front panels off just to show what they look like. You wouldn't see them with those panels on, but they are quite nice looking and aesthetically pleasing, and probably nicer than a Noctua brown, as most people would think anyway. So for testing purposes, I ran a few different things, which I'll show you in a second. And the first, I went through and I set all the fans to quiet, because I wanted to sort of see how we got on there. So I set the fans and the pump to quiet to be able to test the volume of the case and the speed of things. But what you will notice is what I was doing is also I was running multiple benchmarks. So I've got Cinebench R23 running, but I was also running Heaven benchmark, and I'm also obviously recording the footage all on the same PC at the same time. I've got Corsair's iCUE software running in the bottom left and hardware monitor on the bottom right, so you can get an idea of the temps and the fan speeds. And what you'll see is actually a reasonable view. So it was getting around 70 to 80 degrees max on the CPU cores. Now it's worth bearing in mind this is an Extreme Edition CPU. This is the i9-9980XE. Obviously your experience will vary depending on what case you're running, what fans you're running, what CPU you're running, and your environment. So you have to take benchmarks with a pinch of salt, because it really is going to vary, and it really will depend on a lot of different factors. But the point here is to show the temperatures, but also the fan speed and the overall volume of things. So that was one of the things that I wanted to demonstrate. And what you'll see is that the GPU is running a maximum of around 82 degrees, which isn't too bad. Now don't forget that we basically have 3 different things happening here. Obviously I'm recording 1440p footage. I'm also doing Cinebench run, which is a pretty intensive run there, and Heaven benchmark, so I'm benchmarking as well. So a variety of tests are happening, much more than what you'd be doing in the real world. You're unlikely to be doing heavy benchmarking and recording it at the same time, so it's pretty intense on both the CPU and the GPU. But that was the point, because I wanted to see what the performance was like. And as you can see, I'm still only getting around 40 decibels, which is pretty impressive. So pretty quiet and yet effective. And this is obviously with the fans running on quiet, so you can potentially ramp the fans up and make them spin a bit faster, and therefore make things a little bit cooler. And that's exactly what I did. So I went into Corsair's iCUE software once again and set all the fans to extreme, and then ran basically through the same process of basically benchmarking and testing and recording, so that I could give you the results. And now you're going to see the differences there. You'll notice at the moment we're running a little bit lower, so roughly around the 70 degree mark, slightly higher, but it's definitely cooler than it was running before. So obviously putting them on extreme performance, extreme spin up, makes things a little bit cooler over the max temperatures. So probably about 10 degrees in some of the cores as well, which is bearing in mind. The GPU is roughly the same at the top level, but a little bit cooler as well overall. And once again, these aren't actually terribly loud, and that's one of the most important points, is even on the extreme levels, the fans aren't running that much louder. I found I was now getting around 46 decibels, 47, somewhere around there, so it's still significantly quieter than other Corsair fans that I've tried out, especially those RGB ones. Hopefully you found this video useful. Be sure to check out the links in the description to the other related content that might be useful. I'm also going to do a video to compare them with the QL120, so come back soon to see that. Special thanks to my YouTube members: Raw, Geralt of Rivia, I Spawn a Lot, Meter Keyboard, Beaster Bunny, J-Shank 007, Rigsy79, Starastins, McFarty, Aaron Yarden, and Chief Howe. And if you're interested in finding the benefits of being a YouTube member, smash that join button to find out more. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Thanks for watching. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, have a great life.